Hi, I'm Angela Pearce, and this is Building SEND Futures, a series of podcasts exploring some of the key topics in the delivery of SEND provision. I'm joined today by a fantastic panel, all of whom are working on a project over with London Borough of Havering called Balgore SEND School. Before we crack on, I'll get the panel to introduce themselves. Claire?
I'm Claire. I'm an architect and I run a practice called Haverstock, and we specialise in SEND design.
I'm Lara Parr and I'm CEO of Astron Multi Academy Trust. So we run a group of special schools across London and Essex region, and we are building a project along with Claire.
And I'm Darren Cox. I'm the Programme Manager for Capital Delivery at Havering Council, and I'm working on the Balgore scheme and more generally across education expansion in Havering.
That was really exciting. Today we really wanted to explore the capacity crisis. It's a key topic across the sector, not just in construction, but I think as an entire country, really. I was quite keen to try and understand what's driving the demand for all of these additional SEN places. Is that something you can help answer, Laura?
So I don't think there's one key element that has led to an increase in SEND, but I think anyone within the sector or anyone within the SEND community will tell you that there certainly has been a very large increase in demand, in the number of children being diagnosed, in the number of children that require specialist provision, both in mainstream but also with more complex needs in the specialist sector. I think that there are a number of reasons for that. I think that we've got better medical intervention. So for during pregnancy and babies that are born prematurely, we are seeing babies, more medical intervention going on, which means that children are surviving, but they are surviving with forms of brain injury, disability as a result of things that have happened during pregnancy. People within the education, health and social care sector recognising that key milestones are not being met, that there is some kind of additional need present at a much younger age. That better identification is definitely leading to more children on paper showing that they have special educational needs. I'm not sure whether there are more children with special educational needs. I can't imagine that they didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. It's perhaps that we just know who they are.
Do you think COVID had more of an impact, or is this it's just been bubbling there all along?
I'm not an expert, but I do believe that the pandemic and that lack of human interaction may have led to children who didn't get that early intervention. And that's then leading to a lack of school readiness when they turn sort of 4 or 5.
Darren, how are you as a local authority managing that additional pressure for all these additional places?
I think we're constantly playing a game of catch up. The need is there, we can identify it, but then creating environments for these children takes a long time and it takes money, both of which we don't have. So what we're doing is we have the challenge whereby we need to bring children into a setting. We know what that setting is, but we can't provide it in that necessary time. And what we have is, patchwork solutions, temporary solutions that don't really work. We can't adapt to school quick enough or sufficiently enough for all children. So we end up with a situation whereby we might have to come back a couple of years later and do more adaptations.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's always comes down to funding and availability of space and everything else.
But it's so worrying, isn't it, that like my biggest whinge is we're consistently asked by local authorities, can you look at this, can you look at that? And sometimes it's this kind of idea of this satellite provision. But that's just, classrooms without therapy, without all those kind of ancillary spaces that support those classrooms to work. And you're kind of like, is this just a really poor excuse for a special school? And are we going to end up with children that are in this kind of whole myriad of different settings? Some have an amazing brand new school with everything, and some have like a porter cabin and that really kind of hurts me.
We see so many admissions of children that have been in a mainstream setting, desperately awaiting a special school place. They come to us. And I think one of the sad things is what we hear is, and when I speak to those mainstream head teachers and SENCOs, they're doing their best. They're doing an amazing job with very complex children. And they put every intervention possible that we would advise them to have. And for a lot of those children, it really is just the mainstream environment, which is busy and noisy and loud and can be quite chaotic. And they don't have access to those sensory regulation spaces, specialist facilities. And it's just heartbreaking when you've got head teachers, SENCOs teachers that are doing their best, but in an environment and a system which is, there's kind of an element that's out of their control.
Just talking with demand, obviously there's a lot of children that need all of these specialist resources. Are those specialist resources available?
Anyone working with children with special needs, any teacher knows the amazing impact that having a speech and language therapist, an occupational therapist, the right CAM support, the right social care provision and respite in place, that makes such a huge difference. There's only so much that a school and the education system can do. There is such a lack of those specialists available. I mean, I think it's the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapy that stated something like, just after the pandemic, it was something like there's a shortage of about 20,000 speech and language therapists nationally. And that was 5 years ago. Look at the number of EHCPs and the number of identified special needs now. So I'm pretty sure that's probably got worse, not better. Educational psychologists, you know, they are amazing, but they are few and far between. We rarely find those experts to come in and give that holistic support.
But Darren, I don't know, but a big push now is for schools to kind of cluster together, isn't it? And work in partnership. So presumably there's an opportunity for local authorities to kind of pool some of those resources. Is that working?
I think to a degree, yeah. But I think what we're seeing, you know, one of the challenges for a lot of schools, mainstream schools, primary schools in particular, I know of, that they struggle to get staff in and keep them because the setting may not be as good as it could be. Children are getting more dysregulated more often, and that makes it more challenging for the staff. So it just seems to be this vicious cycle of not having enough staff moving elsewhere and using their experience to put children into places, but it just doesn't work.
It's not a secret, is it, that there is a recruitment and retention crisis. There is a high level of pressure during the working week. And so we do see higher levels of sickness, absence of staff. The impact that then has on an already depleted workforce who require so much additional training and expertise and knowledge to be able to meet the needs of these children, you know, that's having a real financial impact on schools, which again then doesn't help our recruitment and retention, you know.
We've spent quite a lot of time on that at Balgores, haven't we? Making sure that we're thinking about the welfare of staff and the neurodiverse staff as much as we're thinking about the young people. So there's like a quiet staff room and there's various different areas that the staff could go to just to be able to have some respite from the day-to-day. It's been quite an interesting way to look at the schedule of accommodation, to actually think about spaces that support staff as much as the young people.
We've never really, in consultation, you know, during those client engagement meetings, never actually thought, oh, what do we need to do for the staff? It's almost as little admin space as possible to then get in more education space. So that's really refreshing.
It's so important. We know that we're working with dysregulated children. If you're going to work with children who are dysregulated, you need to be regulated yourself.
The lack of spaces also has an impact on children and families. How do the families and children who don't have access to that education space, how are they coping?
I mean, this is very real for Lara because it's every day she's living this. But there was something like in 2023, 24, there was 21,000 tribunals, which was like a 55% increase from the year before. And they're estimating we're spending between 150 and 300 million pounds on legal fees in local authorities to deal with tribunals. And we know that 99% of those tribunals will be run by families. So we're effectively just wasting money on legal fees. And if you think about 300 million pounds, that would probably build about 12,000 places. So we're kind of investing in legal fees, not environments. And it's kind of a completely broken system, isn't it?
And also the impact of that on schools and parents and families is just so negative. You know, you shouldn't have to, as a parent, you should not have to get a legal support team, fight the local authority in order to have your child's needs met. The levels of stress that those families are having to go through just to fight for what their child rightly deserves.
And then even after all of those challenges of navigating that system, all of the trauma, and there is trauma for families going through this system, you're going to a school that's an hour away, you know, and your children are making friends at school, but they don't have any local friends. We're saving a lot of money every year on these travel costs that are funded by the council to bring these children back into the borough. Let's teach them locally and give them those opportunities, give them more time at home, give them more time with their friends. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as special schools, we feel that there is that moral duty, actually, to be able to support the schools local to us. We are all very aware that although we are well over capacity, most of us, we wish we had provision and the spaces to offer to all of those other local children that aren't lucky enough to have a place at one of our schools. And so I think most people within the specialist sector do bend over backwards to give advice and outreach support and training to their local sort of mainstream schools, if and where they can. We have to meet the needs of the children in our school first and foremost. Do we actually genuinely have the capacity right now to be able to support the local mainstream sector? And, you know, I'd argue that we're not quite there yet. I think that investment needs to happen within the specialist sector in order to create enough capacity that outreach and advisory support can be put into place for the wider education provision.
But with those, you know, rising needs, there is a real requirement for more investment, and that's creating tension, isn't it? Because that funding isn't available. Are you, as a local authority, looking to try and do anything different to try and meet that demand, or?
So what we have at the moment is SEND units that we've been popping up all over the borough. It's a great success, and we are reducing the strain there. That's for children who need to go into specialist provision within a mainstream environment. But at the same time, we're trying to create these spaces large enough and flexible enough to accommodate mainstream children who need a little bit extra support as well. Ideally, we need another 300 place special school, you know, to pick up more places. And I think, you know, then the system, I think I'll be more comfortable with it locally. But again, it's a rising need. We're just looking at the snapshot of what we need right now. We need to plan for the future as well.
I wouldn't say that you're necessarily reflective of all areas of the UK. There are certainly areas where there are no or there are minimal SEN units within the mainstream sector. And I think it's certainly something that nationally needs to be well considered.
And I think picking up on Darren's point about, you know, we're dealing with the now, but we know in the last 5 years, cohorts have changed and they're going to continue to change, aren't they? How are we accommodating that in design of buildings, that flexibility and the ability to adapt and to change depending on the cohort needs coming into the schools?
A lot of the work that the government are doing at the moment is around standardisation. And I kind of understand that. It makes things more efficient, we can build more effectively. But actually we're seeing the needs of children are so different that standardisation is kind of almost working against some of it. So I think it is this kind of joined up thinking that we see as the more positive way to create flexibility.
So even within a special school, trying to apply a one-size-fits-all model, it really doesn't work. I do have a bit of an issue with the DfE building guidance. I do think that it is out of date, and I think that they need to be looking to professionals like occupational therapists and psychology services to really understand what works based on genuine evidence.
That's the challenge though, isn't it? You can't standardise something that can't be standardised. So I guess from your point of view, Darren, that creates even more challenges, doesn't it? Because, there's only so many sites available to build on.
Many schools were standardised, and that increases the challenge, isn't it? How can we make these adaptations if classrooms are just 45 square metres? How do we extend them? We need more space. We need the rules, I think, relaxed a little bit, or at least find some kind of compromise when battling against these other entities.
I really feel strongly, and we've talked about this, haven't we, Andrew, a lot, about having the right people around the table at the beginning of the process. The money man, the contractor, the educators, the local authority. And if you get the right people around the table, and there is a kind of more difficult problem like converting a building, I think you can come up with a solution. I think you can be innovative. I mean, we worked with Melanie, didn't we? Melanie was, what's the impact of that space? We're not just having that space just because we need more space. It's like, what will that space give us? And I think it's really important to question yourself all the way through.
Did you find having the educationist on board really useful?
Oh, she was brilliant. She was amazing. When you're really in it and you're putting your heart into it, and it's going to be our school, or these are going to be our pupils, you sometimes just need that reality check on the back of your shoulder.
It's, I guess from your point of view, having that third party, independent kind of super specialist has helped in a way make the building more efficient.
Absolutely, yeah. I was about to say it was really comforting from our side as well to have that specialist in, because it became immediately clear that the contractor was serious about what we're doing, and they're taking the right steps. Because I mean, it's you can bring any contractor in to build something because all they have to do is read a drawing, but to be truly bought into the scheme and to understand why we're doing it, not just how we're doing it. I think that's really important.
It's so important, and just even from a wider kind of estate planning point of view, to bring that knowledge from, it comes back to your point, Claire, getting the right people around the table. Because I think that a theme that that's coming out of this conversation is everyone's pretty much working in silos, aren't they? And actually, perhaps an element of dealing with this capacity crisis is that bringing together of all the relevant parties. Actually, maybe people just need to communicate and talk a little bit more. If we could wave a magic wand, what could we do differently, or what could it look like in 5 years' time?
It's so difficult, isn't it? And I know I've said this before, but building a building for a contractor can seem quite a transactional thing. It's like that's what you do. You build buildings to make money, and this is very not that, because it's like such a kind of sensitive subject area and a lot of vulnerable families and children. So I think that's very difficult. But I think in this particular kind of, everyone sat around the table and everyone kind of had the same goal, and everybody individually has their own kind of goals as well, but we knew what the greater good was. And I think it was I'd like to think it was grown up enough that when there was an issue with money, we just said to Lara, instead of kind of going, oh God, what can we take away and what will she not notice? And it was more kind of like, Lara, there's a £100,000 problem. How do we deal with this? You're a professional, you're dealing with much more stressful situations. it's better to be open and transparent about the problem, and then we just all work on it together. I think that's, and it's just been so motivating. It's just, I just think when everyone's kind of heading in the right direction, and if all projects were like that, you just didn't have that kind of, complicated, crazy timescales and crazy bureaucratic processes where you could just sit down with people that know and are passionate about what they're doing, and that is everything to me at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's about being realistic and flexible. I think there was we had a couple of really tough, difficult times when there was a question over, gosh, if we don't negotiate and work together to get something, this whole project could fold and not happen. If I'd have really dug my heels in and said, no, you are not taking this and this out of that design, otherwise, I'm not being part of this. That wouldn't have been helpful. We wouldn't have got anywhere. And like you said, we were so conscious, once this school opens, this is 300 children. It's 300 families. It's all those siblings and grandparents and friends and neighbours that are supporting. This is not just about those 300 children. You're really conscious that if you don't be flexible and you don't find a way together to make it work and make the best out of the limited budget or the limited space that we have, you're letting go of something that's going to be life-changing for an awful lot of people, and certainly for a much wider local community. And so I think always keeping that at the heart of everything. And I think you're right, it was about having all of the different perspectives that really make you look at the big picture, and then we make a decision together. Everybody had a voice, and all decisions were collaboratively made.
Coming back to the capacity issue, this is all good practice in terms of getting those projects moving and hopefully onto site and then the places being. But what could we have done differently earlier? Because obviously a lot has happened, hasn't it, Darren, before you came and procured the project and you got Claire and Lara and us on board. How long was that project in planning before that? And what do we need to do to kind of chivvy those things along a bit more?
Okay, it's always a challenge. Finding a site was one of the most difficult things, and really it came down to that particular site being the only site that was appropriate for this. It's quite a big site. It's directly opposite a primary school, so we always thought, well, maybe we'll put a secondary school there. But it's not big enough for a secondary school. And when the idea came around, let's build a special school there, perfect. And the lead up to that was a long, long time. And we've been, as a team, we've been safeguarding this site for probably about 15 years prior to the inception of this project. No, don't build a secondary school there. It won't be good value for money. The idea of building a special school was just unthinkable. We didn't know that it was needed. It just goes to show how long I've been working at Havering. But when the idea came up, we were just like, it's obvious, that's the site. Yes, it took a long time. That's all I can say. It's always a challenge.
But the money must have been the biggest, that's always going to be the biggest hurdle to all of this. And I think it's been quite difficult for local authorities to plan, because it's not as if they're told, right, over the next 5 to 10 years, this is the investment the government will make in your local authority. And that this isn't, you kind of, you just kind of, these kind of things take a long time, don't they, to kind of, there's a lot of different parts of it. And I think it's unfair on local authorities to a point, because they don't know what money they will get. So the idea that they can have a strategic plan over their estate for like the next 10 years is almost an impossibility for you, isn't it?
No, that's right. With identification and teaching practices also changing all the time, how can you possibly plan for that? Let alone not having the investment to do it. I put a question to you. I wonder if, what if there is no such thing as mainstream, as special provision? What if it's just the norm? Everything is just the norm. What if we're so inclusive in our mainstream schools that we reduce that overspill into the special provision?
A lot of the content of the new white paper and the consultation around the SEND reform is really interesting. This idea of having inclusion bases, which I think has come from a team of professionals who are very knowledgeable and really committed to making meaningful change. This is probably one of the most innovative reforms that we've seen in a very long time in the sector. And I think they need to consult and plan these inclusion bases very, very carefully with local communities, with the local authorities, with the head teachers, with those teachers on the ground, if we're going to get it right.
I guess a bit like you, I wonder, it's all very well writing the strategy, it's then how it's implemented and actually how it follows through is going to be the big evidence piece.
If one of the biggest barriers that we are currently facing is a lack of engagement from health and social care. And that's not to say that there aren't absolutely amazing individuals who are very much part of safeguarding and actually making sure that special needs children have got access to what they can provide those children and families, but it's nowhere near enough. I think that if we could magic up tens of thousands of therapists, EPs, health providers, social workers, that would probably go a very long way in making sure that early intervention was in place, so that those pupils don't then develop complex needs or aren't in need of such specialist provision going forwards.
And does that go back to that kind of conversation that parents are still fighting for what it says on that plan, and therefore you're not able to spend the time educating because you're kind of constantly in battle again?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to give you an example of a tribunal, we will spend hours and days accommodating independent therapist or psychology visitors into the school. You get given a bundle of paperwork, which is normally like this. So you pretty much have to take a day or two as a head teacher out of your working week to read that bundle in order to prepare for the whole day that you have to take out to actually go and do the tribunal, which is extremely stressful. None of us go into this profession because we want to fight against parents or families. We go into this profession because we're very caring and passionate about being a driver of change for these pupils and their families. So it's the level of capacity that I think it's taken away from head teachers and school leaders, where we should be training staff, monitoring teaching and learning, developing our curriculums. We're not able to do the core of what we've been trained to deliver, because actually for a lot of us, we're being totally sidetracked by preparation and engagement in the tribunal system, which is really sad.
And I think I read somewhere that actually because I'm assuming that those plans are born out of a diagnosis or some recognition that a child needs, has more needs. If that's taking up to 10 years in some cases, then that's what child could be a teenager before they're getting the right support. I mean, it doesn't sit right, does it?
Well, I think that's a positive of the new white paper, isn't it? That it's kind of the targeted and the targeted plus. I can't remember what the exact titles are, but because my son at the moment is going through assessment. He's 14, and we've been into the school, and they've been really good actually. I don't want to, they've said, yeah, we definitely see and maybe we should talk to all this other teachers about it. Maybe we should give him a support plan. And you're kind of like, well, he can't just sit and wait for 2 years until, something happens. He's got these needs now. And I think that's the white paper is trying to say that, isn't it? Let's deal with the need straight away. Let's be proactive about it, as opposed to waiting for all these kind of milestones to happen and then we all kick into action. So that is, you know, and lots of primary head teachers have said that, haven't they, that all the money is being directed to so few children and it needs to be kind of spread amongst more children. Yeah. So I think that's really positive that the white paper kind of sees that that is happening. It's just, again, it's only something we're consulting on at the moment. So when does it start to happen, and do people's mindset change now to make that happen, or do we have to wait to kind of 2030?
Yeah, I think that's the worry, isn't it?
All these children stuck in this.
Yeah, and right now you've got all these children in mainstream classrooms with those teachers who don't have the training or the resources to be able to meet their needs. Those teachers are well aware that they are not able to meet that child's needs. But when they have a class of 30, and in most mainstream primary schools, I would say between sort of 3 to 5 of those 30 children have additional needs. Possibly a handful of them will have education, health and care plans as well. All that attention and resource is being diverted to the children with the HCPs, and not actually those other children in the class with additional needs who probably do just need a little bit of early intervention or a little bit of adapted teaching in order to then, you know, make the progress that they should be making. And I think the government are right in trying to keep EHCPs for only the most complex children. I suppose the worry as a parent would be, at the moment, that's the only legally binding document that I have to hold a school or a local authority or the health providers to account. And the concern is, if I don't have that EHCP and it's just down to individual support plan or what provision the school can afford to put into place, does that mean that there's going to be children that start slipping through the gaps?
Yeah. Which is happening already.
And for me, that's really about schools being resourced properly. It's about appropriate levels of school funding. It's about making sure that we don't have a depleted, exhausted, stressed out workforce. It's that we've got enough capacity within our workforce who are well trained, well supported, who have the right levels of you know, from a teacher's perspective, having the appropriate levels of support from your line manager because they have the time to give you, having the right program of CPD and appraisal, that's so important. And right now, unfortunately, most teacher training providers are not delivering a large proportion of training in how to meet the needs of children with special needs.
I've often wondered if that is an issue, that teacher training isn't kind of talking about the same things that we're always talking about. I don't know whether that is just generally considered an issue.
Oh, I mean, from a specialist perspective, it's a huge issue. I mean, we've just spent the last 2 years consulting with all of our staff to create a bespoke teacher training programme. So for our teachers, although they're all qualified teachers from a university perspective, when they come into our special school, we have to then give them a whole year of bespoke induction program, which basically is giving them our own version of a teacher training program from scratch. Okay. Yeah, because they don't have the skills and knowledge to be able to teach well in our special schools. And it must be the same for mainstream colleagues who are supporting arguably the same level of complex needs that we see in specialist.
I think from a primary school perspective, what we see is a lot of senior leaders getting involved directly with the children because there is no knowledge or experience in the workforce there. So I agree, yeah, we need the investment in the training and, you know, and the additional staff at mainstream level as well as special education.
Just thank you so much for your openness and for the conversation. I think it's been really useful. I mean, I've certainly learned a lot, and that's why I really enjoy these things. I think you come away with a huge amount of understanding and awareness that wasn't there before. I guess from sort of a key takeaways point of view, there is definitely something there about breaking down silos and better better communication, better coordination, better linking up among whether it's teams delivering a specific project, or it's government departments, or lots of different stakeholders. It feels like that conversation needs to be happening together and not independently. I think there is, it's not something we can solve in the room, but this idea that there's less red tape to allow projects to happen a little bit more easier. I mean, they're never going to get to site in 3 years, as an example, from the point of identification, but hopefully not 15 years. There's something definitely there. And then hopefully with the new strategy, this idea that mainstream schools can start to become more inclusive, but also have the right resources, provisions, facilities, and all the rest to be able to deal with some of the lack of SEN places that are there. Accepting that there's probably always going to be a need for special schools for those that are more complex. So thank you all again. It was really, really good. If you like listening to us and enjoyed the topic, let's keep the conversation going. Give us a like, share, a follow, and look out for the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.